HAZCOM is short for Hazard Communication. This is a program, once it is in place, that identifies the chemicals in your plant and the hazards of those chemicals. That information is then communicated to you through training and labeling and SDSs so that you understand the risks from working with these chemicals in your work area. Another way of explaining HAZCOM is that it is your right to know on the hazards and identities of the chemicals you are exposed. Because, after all, the more aware you are of the hazards, the more likely you'll take steps to protect yourself with either PPE or what to do in case of emergency. GHS is short for Global Harmonized System. You're probably wondering what that is as well. The original HAZCOM standard was created as a right-to-know type of rule. Think of GHS as more of a right-to-understand rule, so that you better identify the hazards of the chemicals in your area. There are basically three types of chemical hazards. We'll discuss the main two that affect you personally working at your plant: physical hazards and health hazards. Physical hazards are those that affect more your safety. Certain chemicals create heat, fire, or explosions when not stored or used correctly. Propane, when accidentally released, can cause freezer burns to your skin, as well as being a fire or explosion hazard. There are also physical hazards from welding, such as flash burn to the eyes and skin, and possible projectiles from improper use of compressed gas cylinders. Health hazards are those that affect your health, of course, whether that is your lungs, skin, nervous system, or internal organs. These chemicals enter your body through inhalation, ingestion, or absorption through the skin. A good example is Portland cement. For some people, cement can cause dermatitis or irritation when left on the skin or comes in contact with the eyes. This is because cement becomes alkaline on the pH scale and is opposite of an acid when it mixes with your sweat or moisture of your skin or eye. So, wear your PPE, such as Tyvek suits, gloves, and/or safety glasses, per your site's safety rules. And to wash cement off of your hands, arms, or face with a mild soap, and to always know the location of the nearest eye wash. SDSs are documents that give you all the information you need to know about those chemicals with which you work. They describe the physical and health hazards that we just discussed of that chemical and contain critical information in case of emergency. Usually these SDSs are kept together in a 3-ring binder labeled SDSs or safety data sheets. These books are kept in the break room, by the time clock, maintenance shop, and/or offices. They should be always available to you. If you are unsure where the SDS book is located at your facility, ask your supervisor. Typically, there are 3 different types of SDSs at our plants. The first are product SDSs. These provide us and our customers information about our products and sometimes can be found on the company website. For example, cement grout. Secondly, raw material SDSs are for chemicals or substances used in the making or mixing of our final products. For example, aggregate sand, which can be found in a lot of mixes, or mild steel used to roll pipe. These materials may become hazardous only when we start to process them. And third, maintenance and cleaning materials or chemicals have SDSs that cover what you might find in the maintenance shop, such as materials for welding and grinding, or fuels like propane, diesel fuel to power equipment. You need to understand how to read an SDS. First, the SDS should be organized in the manual so that you can find what you're looking for pretty quickly. Usually there's an index at the front of the manual that points you in the right direction within that manual. Secondly, remember that the new GHS rules dictate that the SDS follow a prescribed 16-section format. There may be posters at your plant helping you to understand this format. Your supervisor may walk you through an SDS for Portland cement, for example, to help you better understand. For all containers of chemicals in the plant, they must be labeled. But even then, there are 2 types of container labels: a primary label and a secondary label. A primary label are for those chemicals shipped to our plants. such as paints, thinners, or mineral spirits used to clean parts. If you notice any primary containers that were shipped to our plant without a primary label, notify your supervisor so that the shipper can be contacted and a label added. Secondary labels are for those smaller containers where you or another employee has transferred material from the primary main container into the one you're going to use. These containers still require a label, but not as elaborate as the primary label we just discussed. Your site may have its own system of labeling, and the best type use the original label as a reference. They have pictograms and signal words or statements, like in these examples. Whatever system is used for secondary containers, OSHA wants to make sure it is consistent at your plant and that you understand what is in each and every container and what the hazard is from using that chemical. Pictograms are a set of symbols on the label or in the SDS. Pictograms were designed to help those persons who may not understand all that wording in the label to quickly identify the hazard through the use of a simple illustration. Here are some of the most common pictograms you will see at our plants. The health hazard pictogram is for chemicals which may cause long-term serious health issues or chronic diseases. The flame is probably obvious to you in that the chemical is highly flammable, therefore no smoking is allowed around this chemical. The exclamation mark is for chemicals which may cause an immediate health issue such as irritation to the eyes, skin, or throat. The gas under pressure pictogram warns us of the hazards of gases under pressure. Think of the acetylene and oxygen tanks used for welding. While the corrosion pictogram is for those materials that cause chemical burn, such as muriatic acid or lime, which is very alkaline. You may see 2 or even 3 pictograms on a label, but remember that the SDS will provide you more information if you have any questions. Whether it is bagging and stacking concrete mix, handling other cement-related products, working around pavers and block, or even cleaning the mixer, dust will certainly be generated. A lot of this dust contains nuisance particles, but it also contains silica. Because there is the potential for silica, your plant has developed several control methods to protect you as much as possible. However, the first line of defense is you, and being aware of this hazard. It is important that you understand what is dust, what is silica, and how to protect yourself from the exposure to these air pollutants. First, understand that the dust you see in your plant can be deceiving. The dust cloud you see here is what one would call total dust. While this is not acceptable by any means, not all this dust would enter your lungs. A lot of dust is trapped by your nose hairs, nasal cavity, phlegm, and mucus. The dust that you can't see and would most likely get past all those defense mechanisms and to the sensitive regions of your lung is what we call respirable dust. Generally speaking, respirable dust is made of particles less than 10 microns in size. A human hair is about 100 microns thick. Now let's talk about silica, a possible component of that dust. Silica is the crystalline component of sand, and it is the second most common mineral found in the Earth's crust. It is found in lots of places in nature and in industry, including mineral deposits, rock, stone, granite, sandstone, slate, cement mortar, concrete, brick, and blasting abrasives. Concrete mix, mason mix, block, paver, and grout, and sand products all have silica, some more than others. If silica is so abundant around us, and is dangerous, then why should we all not be more concerned? That's because most of these products or items you encounter are either wet or solid. It only becomes dangerous when it is disturbed, becomes dry, and airborne. This silica can be in the form of crystalline silica. Sometimes you can see these crystals of silica in the light. Sometimes you can't. Prolonged or chronic exposure to silica without proper personal protective equipment can cause silicosis. The typical work being done at a Quikrete, Pavestone, or custom facility does not involve disturbing the material like a sandblaster would, or heating up the material and freeing silica into the air like in a foundry. Both of these jobs are examples where respirable dust and silica levels are very high, whereas at our facilities silica levels can be relatively low. Exposure to silica could occur from bagging pure fine silica or from dust generated from pavers coming out of the tumbler. But the amount in grout, Portland cement caked on the mixer, or in bags of concrete mix are sometimes negligible. How do we know? Because it is very likely that dust and silica have been monitored at your plant. Air sampling has been conducted for a lot of products and every process at our plants, even at the mines. Nonetheless, even with these lower levels of silica, we all still need to be aware of the hazards and where to get that information, either through the label on the product at your line or the SDS manual in your break room. If you're not sure, ask your supervisor if you have any questions. Your plant could have the best designed ventilation system in place, but if you use poor work practices like rotting out the spouts without a bag or rapidly brushing dust off your workstation, you will still have too much exposure. The actions taken by you or your fellow coworker could increase the amount of dust in the air, so watch how you sweep your broom or swing that shovel so that you're not unnecessarily adding to the silica levels. This is a graph of the readout from a direct reading dust monitor from a day at a bag plant. Notice the spikes in the dust levels during improper cleaning and reclaim activities, but not from normal bagging operations. Therefore, how you work makes a big difference. So always be deliberate and careful with your actions when handling product. Be aware that blowing off your clothes with compressed air is not allowed, so be sure to use approved blowers. And understand that good housekeeping keeps the dust from being kicked up from passing traffic. Some plants have rules of employee rotation to reduce your average exposure throughout your shift, so make sure to follow them. Remember, though, that you follow the company's respiratory protection program when rotating to a job that now requires a respirator. Do not eat, drink, smoke, or apply cosmetics where there is silica present. Instead, first get out of the exposure area and thoroughly wash your hands and face before engaging in those activities. And consider giving up smoking altogether, since smoking adds to the health hazards of silica. OSHA estimates that about 90 employees die every year involving confined spaces. Our facilities in the concrete, cement, and pipe industries contain spaces that are considered to be confined because their configurations hinder the activities of employees who may have to enter or work in them. Confined spaces at our plants include dryers, hoppers, storage bins, silos, mixers, cement takers, pits or grizzlies, and other similar areas. What is considered a confined space? Well, if the space is 1. Large enough for an employee to enter his or her body fully, 2. Is not designed to be continuously occupied by that employee, and 3. Has limited way of getting in and out, then that space is considered a simple confined space. The terms permit required confined space or permit space refer to a space that meets OSHA's definition of a confined space and which contains additional health or safety hazards. Before entering such a space, you have to be first trained. Your plant requires a written permit to be filled out before you enter so that you understand and follow your plant's procedures. Some spaces at your facility have been evaluated and reclassified as non-permit. This is because the only hazard identified is a non-atmospheric type, and typically the only safeguard needed is to lock out the machinery that would affect personnel in the space. In this case, a reclassification process or form is still needed to ensure the space is considered safe to enter. Other precautions include waiting for a cool-down period, or having a safe way to access the space, or removing the aggregate material from the hopper. Regardless of what space is being entered, always remember that any part of your body that breaks the plane of the opening is considered entry. This is why one of the critical rules at your plant prohibits unauthorized entry into a confined space. Regardless of the production line that you may be working at while at your facility, or whatever routine job task you do on a daily basis, it's important that you understand the risks of lifting and moving product. Let's get back to the basics of proper lifting techniques. It would be a good bet that you know what the first rule of lifting basics is. Use your legs. Try to keep your back as straight as possible. Notice the baseball catcher's position with wide stance, elbows inside his knees, and face forward, looking at where he's going to lift. The second rule of back to basics is to avoid twisting. A lot of injuries occur when you twist and lift a heavy bag or a block at the same time. It may be convenient to twist to get the job done quicker, but you need to remember that there's a lot of pressure being put on those discs in your back. So move your feet and pivot them as much as possible. The third back to basics rule, and probably the most important, is keep the load as close to your body as possible. But if you stretch out and hold a bag or block out away from your body, you create high stresses on your lower back. So whatever product you are about to lift or transfer, whether it is a board or block or that bag of aggregate, it all comes down to keeping it in the power zone. The power zone for lifting is close to the body and between the knuckle and shoulder. This zone is where arms and back can lift the most weight with the least amount of effort. And if you lift with your legs and you don't twist and hold the load close to your body, you are keeping it in the power zone. It's very important to plan your lift. For example, if the load is too high to properly lift it, then grab a ladder. The simple addition of a step at this hand-at station allows the employee to keep the bag at the power zone. If you have a long walk with a large box, use a dolly. Again, plan your lift. If it's too heavy and you can't get a good grip, ask for help, or better yet, grab a tool. It's better to lose 2 to 3 minutes of your time to save your back. If you have the tools, use them. And if you don't, well then, there are other ideas. Look at this forklift operator keeping the pallet in the up position so that he can keep the bag in the power zone. This video may not apply to every situation at your plant. Regardless of the tools you have at hand or the type of equipment your plant has to move or lift product or materials, you still need to always use the proper mechanics of lifting presented in this Back to Basics video. That is, use your legs, don't twist, keep the load close. Keep it in the power zone.